safest, most comfortable feeling. You stand in what's left of you, and you die to self, and you keep on dying. It's like a tree that lets go of its leaves. That beautiful clothing has fallen away, and the tree just stands there in the cold of winter, totally exposed, totally surrendered.
As those who know the story, Joseph's brothers decide not to kill him, and they pull him out of the pit and they sell him into slavery to a group of Ishmaelites on their way to Egypt. Once in Egypt, as a servant in Potiphar's household, Joseph rises in the ranks and becomes honored and respected, not just by those he served, but by everyone around him. Listen as Stephen explains what it was exactly in Joseph that left everyone else in awe.
What people sensed in Joseph was a wisdom that was actually a mode of love. Through his death and rebirth, he had found a way to live the still unhanded down great commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. This is actually a description, not a commandment, since love of God is not something we can summon by an effort of the will. It's something we arrive at naturally as the mind deepens and matures. And we come closer to it the more clearly we understand that what is most valuable in this human life of ours is the unnameable, the inconceivable. It is everything, and also nothing, because it is beyond our categories of thought. It includes its own opposite, both and, neither nor. In the words of our teacher Spinoza, it is that which, when discovered and attained, allows us to experience continuous, supreme, and never-ending happiness, whatever may happen to us. The Kabbalists called God Ein Sof, the infinite, the unending, and that is accurate too, as far as it goes. But what about the finite, the ending? Isn't God there, i.e. here, too? Isn't God that, i.e. this, too? The whole earth is full of his glory, the seraphim chanted to Isaiah. Do we need to transcend the here and now in order to understand what is most important? Is that desirable? Is it even possible? Where have you come from? An ancient Chinese Zen master asked a monk who was seeking his instruction. From the monastery of spiritual light, said the monk. The master said, in the daytime we have sunlight. In the evening we have lamplight. What is spiritual light? The monk, baffled, was silent. The master answered for him, sunlight, lamplight. There is nothing mystical about this. Wisdom is a mode of love because it's a mode of presence, that is, of attention. The questioned mind sees itself in the same way that it sees the world, with awe and with deep gratitude. And it expresses its wonder in the language of pure reason as clearly as in the language of ancient scripture. Listen to the words of our teacher Einstein. The scientist's religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority that in comparison with it, the highest intelligence of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection. From awe, there are just a few steps to humility, from humility to wisdom, and from wisdom to happiness. The book of Proverbs isn't kidding when it says, happy is the man who finds wisdom. That's simply the way of it. Joseph understood this.
I'm going to introduce you now to the person who's going to host this podcast, an extraordinary soul, the most magnificent one I know, my partner in life, my love, my wife, my sage. She's going to do this interview because she was so deeply touched. This will be her first time hosting the podcast, and I know you're going to enjoy your time with her. So without further ado, here is Sage Robbins and Stephen Mitchell.
Hello there, Stephen. Welcome, everyone. Stephen, it's such a gift to have you here today. And I have to tell you, the book, Joseph and the Way of Forgiveness, was transformative and transcendent reading it. And thank you for being here. And thank you. It's just such a precious gift to hear your own voice reading these chapters.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Sage. I'm very glad to be here with you.
What struck me, I've heard this story and familiar with, obviously it's a classic, but you breathed such light into this story, and I felt you brought forgiveness and compassion to life. You told the story in a way that was just so unique and riveting, honestly. We were so captivated, and what was so incredible, as a family, we read this book like we've never read it before. We read it out loud as a family, Tony, myself, Mary, and a very dear friend of ours, James. We took turns reading in front of the fire, and we read chapter by chapter, and we wept and we laughed, and truly it was just extraordinary. And we'd pause throughout and share our own personal understandings. I'm curious, what pulled you at this stage to write this book, and why Joseph?
Well, Joseph and his brothers, which is the last story in the book of Genesis, has been my favorite story in the whole Bible for decades. And at some point I discovered that my favorite novelist, Tolstoy, called it the most beautiful story in the world. So there were two of my beloved consciousnesses together in that statement. And at some point a couple of years ago, it seemed to me that it would be a fascinating adventure to flesh out the story. It's told in an extremely concise way so that many of the sentences can be paragraphs or pages long in meaning. It's so compressed. So I thought I would use the ancient Jewish art of midrash. Midrash is a way of creatively expanding a biblical story to, as you said, give flesh and blood to this beautiful embodiment of forgiveness in the Bible, and to feel my way into each of the characters. There are many, including some wonderful female characters, which isn't often the case in the Bible. So I would step into each character and smell the smells and see the sights and expand the story by elaborating on what wasn't touched in the original but was perhaps implied. And it was a terrifically fulfilling adventure for me, and now for the many people who have read the book and responded to it in such a profound way.
Thank you. It really, for myself, it was extraordinarily profound. And gosh, today